All right. Welcome everyone to the Bible study tonight as we are getting back into the study on wisdom, but we're also getting ready to finish this study on wisdom. We've only got one or two more studies to go after this, so we won't be in this much longer. However, next week we should have Dr. Martin back with us. So even though we're just jumping right back in, we'll still have to wait a couple more weeks before we finish. So sometime in July, we'll be finishing the study on wisdom. It's been an exciting journey to go through and look at all these different things. But like everything, it has its end point somewhere. So we'll be coming to that soon. Today, we're looking at the sin of hasty actions. I see I have one of my friends from school. So I give my greetings to you, Terrell. I appreciate you coming in and comments. So, all right, don't let me get too far distracted, but it's nice to see I haven't seen him for a long time. So, uh, Proverbs 19 is where we're going to start at. Let me go ahead and throw up the wisdom chart real quick, and I'll give that before we get into our passage. And so, for the wisdom chart, we should be familiar with it by now, as this has been what we've been using to help relate and discuss all these different aspects of wisdom and biblical intelligence. And so, as we look at these, we have talked about pretty much everything at this point. The only thing we haven't talked about is that little red triangle, that little green triangle, and then at the very bottom, that yellow triangle that says, or orange triangle, I'm sorry, it says hasty in actions. So we haven't talked about the relationship of how when someone is, let's go through the line of it, had their heart touched by unbelief, and then their heart having been governed by this unbelief, becomes scornful and foolish, with that proud and froward, and eventually get to where they don't think things through. That pride causes them to make decisions without actually thinking about it or acting in wisdom concerning it. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Of course, with this, we have also next week we'll look at, or not next week, but next time we'll look at the being wise in your own conceit and a low self-esteem, and how those come about. So there's where we stand. That's where we're going to be looking at as we get into it tonight. So as I said, Proverbs chapter number 19 and verse number 2 is our passage for tonight. All right, so let me find my place there. It says also that the soul be without knowledge, it is not good, and he that hasteth with his feet sinneth. So God tells us, while there's not a tremendous amount that you'll find about this exact idea, as far as like verses directly attacking it, the idea that I'm going to show to you tonight is something that's laced throughout your Bible. In fact, you could use most any story in the Bible of somebody falling in sin or getting in trouble as a cautionary tale for this. And that's why, to be honest, I said when we're talking about words, even though the Bible says a lot more about words directly, like directly attacking, it's actually easier to illustrate this as a sin than it is being hasty in words. One is we have a verse that clearly says, he that hasteth with his feet sinneth. So here in Proverbs 19, verse number 2, we're told that it's if the soul be without knowledge, it's not good. So it's not good for you to not know what you're doing, to not have a plan, to have an idea about things. That's not good. But when, all right, I'm being told there's echo on the sound, so I'm not really sure what that's about. All right, I took off echo cancellation. I don't know if that helps. I can't really hear myself to know if that made any difference. It's not normal that there'd be an echo or any problem on the sound, as I use this mic every week and I've not had any problems with it. So if somebody can give me some feedback, let me know how it sounds. I would appreciate that. That way I know if it's okay. All right, and then Terrell says it's fine. I'm going to open it for a second and hope that it doesn't mess up. So I've checked it. Sounds fine to me. Mike, if you're having problems with the sound, you need to reload your screen or something on your side. It's a technical issue on your side, because there's two people, myself included, who've confirmed that the sound is good right now. All right, so not to lose train of thought or where we're at, it's not good for you to not know what you're doing. It's not good for you to not have a plan or knowledge or wisdom about things. But God says when we just rush into things without thinking about them, He says he that hasteth with his feet sinneth. That means when we just rush into things, that we are committing sin in the process. So there is something that has to be understood in that. It's not. He's obviously not saying it's a sin to go running. I mean, the Bible compares a lot of good things to running. He's talking about rushing into things. That when we rush into things, that while the actual act of rushing into something may not necessarily be a sin, when you do it, it will result in sin in the process, either because you've not consulted God or you've made some poor decisions or so forth. And so I'm going to show you that because there's actually some good stuff in here, just in the book of Proverbs alone, but also, as I said, throughout the Bible, that shows us that when we don't take the time to actually pray about it, think about it, whatever it is we're supposed to do biblically speaking, or we're just rushing and pushing to try to get to where we're going, we get into trouble as a result of it, or we get into sin as a result of it. So with that said, we're going to run through some verses in Proverbs, then I'm going to give you what I think is probably the greatest biblical example of this. Not fair to say the greatest, but it's one where God specifically calls it out himself. And to me, the fact that it's a small decision but has lasting repercussions that run throughout the entire Bible is why I consider it to be such a great example. But we'll get to that later after we run through these verses in Proverbs and a few in Ecclesiastes as well. So Proverbs chapter number 21 and verse number 5. Proverbs 21 verse number 5 says, "The thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness, but of every one that is hasty only to want." So he says when somebody's diligent, somebody who's actually putting in the effort, putting in the work, doing what they're supposed to be, that brings plenteousness. It brings prosperity to what you're doing. So you can apply that principle to pretty much everything. If somebody's trying to be good at their job, the one who's actually putting the work into it, putting the time into it, learning the skills and all that's associated with it, putting in the study and so forth, that person will be prosperous in it. But the one who just takes it for granted and rushes into it, that person will get in trouble. I mean, there's a reason why when you go to a surgeon, you want him to have studied for 8 to 10 years or sometimes even more, not somebody who just, went to a trade school for a few weeks and that's what he learned to do. There's a reason why you want people to have put in the time necessary to learn the skills that they're doing for their job. And the truth is, while some people may coast by quite well on talent and natural abilities, this principle does apply to all of us, because even those who coast by pretty well on talent or natural abilities, they themselves know that if they would put in some effort, they would be much more successful at what they're doing. They'd be much more plenteous or prosperous at what they're doing. So that's the idea being presented to you. The ones, people who don't take stuff seriously enough to be hasty, to actually, to be diligent, to put in the work, but instead are just hasty and rushing into things, throwing stuff together haphazardly, it only brings want. It brings a lack. I mean, that's what want is. So then Proverbs 14 and verse 29, Proverbs 14 and verse 29 says, "He that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty of spirit exalteth folly." So you're going to notice there's a contrast, and that's even why I'll bring some other verses into this, even over in Ecclesiastes, is because there's actually a contrast between hastiness and anger, and how that should be contrasted against someone who is calm and patient in their spirit and so forth. So hastiness is oftentimes connected to anger. And that's why God tells us to be slow to wrath, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to wrath. And He tells us in that same thought, that the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God, is because when we do stuff in anger and we're doing stuff emotionally, and because of whatever upset or things we may have, we're not doing one with wisdom. Emotional decisions, even if you come to the right decision, an emotional decision is not a wise decision. So, just because you accidentally happen on the right thing, if you made your decision emotionally instead of prayerfully or spiritually, it was not a wise decision. It was an emotional decision. It was foolish, to be honest. And so there's something to be understood about this. But in the verse we just read, the idea that's being presented to us is to say that when we are slow to wrath, it's an example that we are of great understanding, which we know is one of the key foundations of biblical intelligence. You have wisdom, knowledge, understanding. So he says someone who's slow to wrath is of great understanding. They actually understand what's going on, the consequences of it, the repercussions and everything. They're understanding to the person who or whatever situation is causing them to potentially be angry. That's why they're able to hold back that wrath. It's because of that understanding. So it is to be able to hold back your anger is a sign of intelligence. And I know most men don't want to hear that because most men struggle with their temper. But in reality, struggling with your temper and not learning that self-control is a sign of foolishness. It is a sign that our wisdom is lacking, at least. So it's because we're being ruled by our emotions, and wisdom should allow you to overcome being ruled by your emotions, at least to some degree. Then the other half of that verse, because remember, Proverbs most always are a balancing act. That's why you'll notice most of them have a colon in the middle of them. It's because you have the first half of the verse sets up one idea, the second half of the verse sets up another idea, and that colon is the pivot point in the middle that it all balances on. So the second half of the verse says, But he that is hasty of spirit exalteth folly. So when we are hasty in our spirit, like it's just who we are, it's our nature is to just rush into things and not think about it and just make quick decisions and get in trouble and so forth. God says we exalt folly when we do that we lift up folly. We lift up, and remember, folly is the act of foolishness. That's the way that God describes foolish behavior throughout the book of Proverbs. So he says we lift up foolishness, we exalt that. When we rush into our decisions and we make decisions quickly and so forth without thinking about what we're doing. Then the next verse would be Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 9. And this is continuing the idea about anger. I said we would run on that just a little bit. Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 9 says, But be not hasty in spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. So God tells you that we need to be careful to not be hasty in our spirit. That means to not be quick-spirited about being angry. So don't be somebody who you don't control your anger, you don't hold back your temper, but you just rush into it. I mean, that's when God talks about a wrathful man and so forth. That's what he's talking about many times, is this person who just, their anger is like a burning fire that always wants to punish everyone that upsets them. And most of us men who struggle with our temper know that that's exactly the kind of temper we have. One that's almost like a burning fire that just, we want to punish people who upset us. And so when we look at that, we have to understand that our wisdom should keep us from being hasty into our anger, because anger resteth in the bosom of fools. So anger comes out of the heart of a foolish person, someone whose heart is foolish. Someone whose heart is wise, that person should not be so easily overcome by their anger. Now, I'm having hesitation and pause because while I listened to the audio on my phone and checked it, I hear an echo in my room, so there may be something to the echo thing, but if I didn't hear it and Terrell didn't hear it and whoever else hasn't heard it, I assume we're okay. I also see I have at least one person over on Twitch watching, so I don't know if I get comments from Twitch. Maybe if you're watching over there and you want to drop a comment just so I can see if my live stream platform will actually give that to me, that would be fantastic. It would be a help to me, even if it's not something you're super interested in. All right. Then Proverbs 28 and verse 20. Proverbs 28 and verse 20 says, A faithful man shall abound with blessings, but he that maketh haste to be rich shall not be innocent. So we're seeing one side already of where hastiness is a problem. One side of hastiness is that when we are hasty and we don't take time to consider what we're doing, many times our emotions will overrule us, and anger being one of the chief ones, because normally people in general, the emotion that overcomes us the quickest is anger. Sometimes we'll make decisions out of joy. I'm so excited about something, and we'll make decisions, and later we'll have that buyer's remorse. It is true that other emotions have that effect on us, where they help cause us to make poor decisions. But anger is the one we all most commonly struggle with, men and women both. Men are more famous for it, but everybody does. Mike says the echo was a Google problem, so I appreciate you letting me know. Otherwise, it's kind of in my subconscious the whole time, distracting me a little bit, not knowing which one it is. All right, I appreciate that. But then you get to this other side of it, and the other side of where hastiness is a problem is this idea that he's bringing, that when you rush things, you're not putting in the diligence like we talked about earlier, you have to compromise something on the way. So let me read that verse again. A faithful man shall abound with blessings, but he that maketh haste to be rich shall not be innocent. God's saying if you're going to rush to get rich, if that's your goal, like your desire is you want to be rich. And understand, God also says that, that he that hastes to be rich hath an evil eye, and consider not that poverty will come on him in the end, in Proverbs 28, verse 22. So actually just a little bit down from where we are. So let me even read verse 21 to give slight context. To have respect of persons is not good, for a piece of bread that man will transgress. He that hasteth to be rich hath an evil eye, and considereth not that poverty shall come upon him. So that verse ties our next thought as well. That's why I was waiting to get to it. But I want you to see this, that God says when we haste to be rich, like that's our goal, that's my desire, is I just want to get ahead. I just want to be successful. I'm going to rush, and I'm going to do, fight, whatever I have to do to get there. There's two things in this passage. One is the verse we just read that says that you're not considering the consequences in the end, but the verse we're looking at right now, primarily verse 20, says you'll not be innocent. That somewhere on the way, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to compromise. People who haste to be rich because they get that evil eye, which is greed. This is God's way, like we call envy a green-eyed monster. It's God's way of saying, you're greedy. When people become greedy after money, and that's their goal, is I have to get rich. I'm just going to force and fight and do what I have to get rich. And they're not stepping back and thinking about it and, taking their time to do things right and properly. Then if you're not going to do something right and properly, you have to compromise to get there. That's why you have all the cautionary tales about somebody making a deal with the devil, which, understand that's not really what people make it out to be, but you get this idea, like these cautionary tales of, people making a deal with the devil, selling their soul for this or this or this. While there's something to that, the reality of those tales is just this idea that if you're going to try to get rich quick, if you're going to try to get talented quick, if you're going to try to be successful quick, if you're going to try to cheat your way to the top, you're going to have to sell yourself. And in reality, that's a lot of what is meant when God says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and to lose his own soul? Is you understand soul, especially in the New Testament, is not being used to talk about salvation. It's talking about your seat of your emotions, your desires, your thoughts. Your soul is who you are. It's your inner person. Your spirit is the one that pertains more to your salvation. That's why your spirit is what is dead until you get saved. And when you're saved, that spirit is quickened or made alive in Christ. So the fact that he says soul in that passage tells you that it's not uniquely about salvation. Now, there is application to salvation. So I'm not saying you can't use that to preach about salvation. The idea is, what would it profit you to gain the whole world but to lose yourself? Because if you're going to put your goals and your attention and your focus on being successful in this world, whether that be in terms of money, talent, or something else, that this is it, I'm going to focus all my attention there, then you're going to lose yourself in the process. And I think everybody who will listen to this can come to the conclusion that somebody like that. Somebody that the more they gave themselves into trying to get money, they lost themselves. They're not the person they used to be. Whatever good was there seems to, a lot of it just died out along the way. Care that they had for people, that desire to do things right, the integrity that they had, so much of that got lost on the way trying to be successful. That's why you have biopics about singers and musicians and everything, and all of them almost always are cautionary tales about this person who had talent and they tried to just shoot their way up to the top. In fact, even when I had my visitors here from America just last week, they noticed that there's an Elvis Presley one. And for sure, I know a little bit about it to know that that's what it is, a cautionary tale about the dangers of just shooting to the top on success and not taking the time to do stuff correctly. That's why even with pastors, God gives a warning. He says not to lay hands on any man suddenly. It's not just with pastors. That's with putting anybody in position. But with pastors, he says that a pastor cannot be a novice, because people should pay their time, pay their dues. Somebody shouldn't just be shot up to leadership positions, because there are skills and maturity and things you learn along the way. And if you get there without doing that, one, you don't learn the lessons, and two, you're going to lose something important on the way. You're going to lose some integrity. You're going to lose some morals. You're going to have to compromise something to do that. And anybody who's ever been remotely successful in anything in this world knows that in order to succeed in the world and to do it quickly, you're going to have to compromise something to do that. You're going to have to give up something on the way for the world to, give you that pat on the back, that thumbs up, that approval that you're looking for. So it's very important that we don't just rush into these things and try to, not think it through, not take the time to do it right, but just rush and rush and rush to get whatever it is, because things should be done properly. In fact, let me give you, this is a proverb from me. It's not a proverb from the book of Proverbs. This is my little proverbial saying that laziness is a sin, but patience is a virtue. We always have one of two opinions many times. We either look at somebody who takes their time and they're not so quick to rush into things, and we think, oh, that person's lazy. But that doesn't mean somebody's lazy. The other side of that we should look at it, and while it's true some people are just lazy, is that somebody who's taking the time to think about their decisions is exercising wisdom. Somebody who's taking time to pray about their decisions is exercising faith in God. Now you tell me which one is better, that I exercise wisdom or faith, or is it better that I just rush in trusting my own wisdom, let's put in quotation, my own ideas, my own philosophies, my own judgment, without considering the consequences, without considering, what it's going to cost me on the way, without considering, what's going to come from all of this, letting my emotions drive me and force me to make decisions poorly. Because anytime you're rushing into decisions, you're not praying them through, you're not thinking them through, you're not getting wisdom and counsel, then what you're going to start relying on at some point, because your information is going to run out. You don't know everything about everything. You're not always going to be properly informed about the things you're making decisions about. You're not always getting to read the whole contract. You've been raised to just click, I read the terms and agreements and accept. So eventually you're going to run short on all of that. And what's going to happen is you're going to start coasting by on your emotions. You're going to let your emotions, I don't like this person, I don't like this thing. And you're going to make very poor decisions as a result of it. You're going to start coasting by on your judgment. And most people's judgment is not as good as they think it is. I mean, I'll put it this way, I have a very good sense of judgment when it comes to people. Now, when it comes to things, we can debate. But when it comes to people, I usually have a very good sense of judgment. But I've been wrong. I mean, even though my batting average is well above average when it comes to being a judge of character, nobody's perfect. I've been wrong more than once. Sometimes I'm glad I'm wrong, because I had a negative opinion about somebody, and if I was running off of emotions and off of my opinions, I wouldn't have chosen to invest as much time in that person as I did. And the other side, I've invested time and energy into people that I almost wish I could get it back, to be honest, because it was a waste of my time for some. Now, saying all of that, I'm just trying to show that even in our places where we're strongest, when we're coasting by on natural skills and talents and stuff, and we're just trying to rush into things without thinking it through, without praying it through, without seeking counsel and so forth, we're going to get in trouble. That's why he says, he that hasteth with his feet sinneth. Because when you just rush into your decisions, you're going to have to make compromises on the way. You're going to make poor decisions on the way. You're going to make emotional decisions on the way. And then the next of these points we see in Proverbs is one we've already introduced. You're not going to think about the consequences. He says when somebody's greedy, they don't realize that poverty's coming in the end, that they're going to actually have poverty. You're making a life all about money, but poverty is what you're going to get instead. There in verse 22 of chapter 28. But let's look at Proverbs chapter 7 and verse number 21. Proverbs chapter 7, verse number 21. Proverbs chapter number 7, verse number 21 through verse number 23. It says, Wilt her much fair speech cause him to yield? With the flattering of her lips she forced him. He goeth after her straightway as an ox goeth to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks. Till a dart strike through his liver, as a bird hasteth to the snares, knoweth he not that it is for his life. Till a dart striketh through his liver, as a bird hasteth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life. Think about that. He's describing in this passage, if you don't know what's being described, this idea of a young man who lacks understanding. And he's describing that with this young man who lacks understanding, that one night he's walking, and a woman comes to him with her much fair speech, and she begins to try to tempt him. She begins to tell him, that my husband's gone away, he's gone for, a certain period of time, and that he's not coming back, and I've done all these things. She goes into this big list of temptations that she's prepared for him. And as she's going through this big list of temptations that she's prepared for him, God pauses in all of this to tell us that he doesn't think about the consequences. He doesn't realize that he's just like a bird that's rushing into a net to, because there's something there that it wants. He doesn't realize he's an ox that's being led off to be slaughtered. He's a bird that's hasting to the snare, that's rushing into something that's going to catch him, something that's going to destroy him. And when we are hasty in our decisions, when we're quick to make decisions, we're not going to consider the consequences. That's where, the idea of buyer's remorse, think about that for a moment. All the time you go in a store and they'll have something listed as being 50% off or 70% off or so forth. And I'm going to be honest with you, everywhere in the world, I guess that's probably lies. I came to trust it more than I probably should have because, in general, I knew prices in a lot of stores in my area, and a lot of the ones where I was from originally were relatively honest about it. I mean, there might be a slight markup, but nothing dramatic. However, when I came here, it's like an absolute betrayal to go in certain stores. I mean, maybe it's not just or right, or maybe I'm not allowed to even call them by name if I'm going to say maybe it's slander, but I have photographic proof of it, so I assume I'm okay to say it. But Carrefour, for example, I like to shop for deals, and so I go to the huge Carrefour next to me, which anybody in America, it's like a Walmart. I go to the huge Carrefour next to where I live, and I know where they put all the stuff that's on sale, and I specifically go around and target that while Lori does the shopping she likes to do. I take the two most annoying of the children, which are the two biggest, and then I go around and I look for the deals. However, I've had to learn with this particular store to not trust the deals, especially when it comes to non-food items. Food items are usually pretty safe. Usually if they say it's whatever percent off, it's that percent off. But when it comes to non-food items, I have multiple occasions where if I pull back a sticker, there's another sticker underneath, and they're claiming this item would sell for 17 euros or whatever, and then I peel it back and there's the normal sticker. The normal sticker says it's like 10 euros, and it's on sale right now for 8 euros, so it is technically 2 euros off. But it's not, what they're claiming. It's not the huge percentage off that they're claiming it is, the almost 50% off, the 40% or whatever. So my point is, it's not something I've experienced once. I've experienced it multiple times with them. And so now I've learned by wisdom to not just get big eyes, when I see that something's on sale. I'm like, oh, that's great. I wanted one of those. And it's 50% off. I've learned to actually, see what the price is. Maybe go check online how much it sells for or something before I buy it. I've learned especially to take it to my wife because that's kind of her thing. She knows prices for everything everywhere. And so I've learned to take it to her many times and to show her and say, is that a good deal or not? And she'll look at it. Even when it comes to food items and stuff, she'll look at it and tell me whether it's a good deal or not. But my point is, we as people are naturally inclined when we see 50% off, 70% off, whatever percent off, to, oh, I need that, without ever actually thinking it through. And we buy stuff that we don't actually need. We buy stuff that you'll never use. It's just going to go in the corner of your closet or whatever, and you may use it one time, but it was on sale, so of course you needed it. Because when we make those quick decisions, we don't actually think about the long-term repercussions of whether we actually need it, whether it was actually a wise decision. And the worst part is we don't think about the consequences. We say something quickly in anger and we don't think about how it's going to hurt the person that hears it. We say something quickly because right now I'm upset or my emotions are controlling me, and we don't think about it. So when I say the buyer's remorse, that's your joy. You're excited because you see something on sale and you make an emotional decision without thinking it through. The same way when you get mad and you lash out at somebody in anger and say something you shouldn't, you've made an emotional decision. The same way, you get mad at your boss and you quit or whatever. You get mad at this and you do that. You get mad at the person at the store, so you throw a tantrum and don't realize that I shop here regularly. I probably need to be able to come back to this store again and not be remembered as the guy who did that. We have to think about those things. People don't think about it, though. If we make emotional decisions, we don't think about that. I remember myself, I'll use myself as an example. One time I went to the container park, to the dumps next to where the church is. And I went to drop some stuff off, and I was, to be honest, that particular container park has some of the most contentious employees of any container park around the city, but it's the one closest to the church, and it's very common that I need to take stuff from the church there. And they have some, in my opinion, ridiculous rules, but it's their rules. And I finally got, at one point, just had enough. I was having a bad day. And there was a guy who came to me who, to be honest, is probably the nicest of the guys that work there. He's the one who, if anybody didn't deserve to be yelled at, it was this guy. And he made me mad because he fussed at me about something I was doing. He didn't like the way I was throwing something away. And he didn't even do it in a rude way. He just told me, you can't do that. And so I got in my car, and with the windows down, my son asked me a question, and I didn't think through what I was doing. And I forgot that I live in a country where the vast majority of people speak English fluently, even though I rarely ever speak Dutch because most people speak English fluently. So you're in a bad mood when you don't even think about the basic logical things that are right in front of your face. And I began to fuss about how, in order to work at this place, you have to take an IQ test to prove how stupid you are, because you can't work here if your IQ reaches above a certain level. And after I drove out, of course, almost immediately, I began to regret my decision because I realized that was awful. I should not have said that. I shouldn't act like that. It's not proper. This guy doesn't even know who I am. He doesn't know what my job is. He doesn't know me. It's not like I'm hurting the testimony and reputation of the church or any of that stuff, but I'm hurting a person. And so it's let's say it's worse when it's hurting the reputation of Christ and so forth. But in this case, this guy doesn't know nothing about me. It's just that it was not right to hurt a person. Now, thankfully, when I went back the next time and I had opportunity to go and apologize to him, it turns out he doesn't speak English. He's one of the few people in Belgium who doesn't. So he had no idea, didn't even remember me being mad. But now, through having went back and apologized, I actually made a friend there. But it's just, my point is, while it was possible in that situation to go back and fix it, rarely is it actually possible to go back and fix it. When you make those emotional decisions, many times the consequences you set up are consequences you're not getting out of. When that lust draws, like what was in the passage we were reading there, when that lust draws you and you choose to go after it, it's very rare you're going to get a second chance to fix what was done. You have plenty of examples of people in the Bible who that one moment of lust, that one bad decision affected them for the rest of their life. Probably no greater example than that of David, because of just the way that God answers him when he says the sword will never depart from your house. So there are everlasting consequences sometimes to our decisions, things that will stick with us for the rest of our life. Now, the other side of that is that not only do you have these kind of consequences and so forth towards yourself, but you have consequences towards others. You have impact on other people that you have to consider. But when you're making emotional decisions and rash decisions and quick decisions without thinking them through, praying them through, and so forth, then it's not just yourself that's going to suffer, but it's the people around you, people who are affected by those decisions. And when you're making them quick, very rarely are you thinking about those people. Again, I lost my temper and said something in anger because I was angry, and all I thought about was myself. It was a very, 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 very selfish decision. Now, again, I escaped narrowly because of the fact that the person who should have been hurt by me getting upset didn't understand anything I said. He just knew that some angry guy got in a car and drove away. However, normally speaking, my decision was selfish because I should have thought about him. Just because I was mad doesn't mean you can hurt somebody. Now, I'm using that as an example of myself because I want you to understand that we all risk doing this. Whether your anger or your emotions, not just anger, but other emotions, you make decisions. You make decisions because you're sad. You make decisions out of joy and so forth. Whether it be your emotions that cause you to make quick decisions or not, it's still wrong. Those emotions are not evil of themselves, but they're not supposed to control you. They are warning lights that flash up on the dashboard of your car to tell you when something is wrong. They're signal lights helping to mark which way you're supposed to be going and so forth. They're indicators of the speed that you're going at. They're not things that are meant to govern you. You're supposed to be controlling your emotions. God tells you over and over to rule your emotions, to guard your heart, and so forth. And so, when they're controlling us, it is foolishness that has allowed us to be that way. It's not wisdom. Whether it's your lust, some sinful desire or fleshly desire inside of you that's causing you to make the decisions you're making, whether it be greed after money or some other temptation, you can't afford to chase after that. Because if you're chasing after your lust, one, you're going to have to compromise on the way. You're going to have to make some decisions wherein he that hasteth to be rich will not be innocent. You will have to lose something of yourself on the way and sacrifice some of who you are. The other side of that is there will be consequences, and I can guarantee that if you're rushing into these decisions, you're not thinking it through. The prudent man foreseeth evil and hideth himself, but the fool goeth his way and is punished. That's why this is in contrast to prudence. Prudence allows you to step back and see where this path is taking me and consider it, and through wisdom figure out what are the consequences of going in this direction. When you're hasty in your actions, that is the opposite of prudence. You're not stepping back to see what is the right decision. You're making decisions based off of sensual things, off of lust, off of emotions, and so forth, off of pressure from other people. All of those things are poor decisions. Now, saying that, I told you I would give you a story in the Bible that I think is one of the greatest examples of what I'm talking about, why it's dangerous to not pray it through, think it through, so forth. And that is Joshua chapter number 9 of all things. In Joshua chapter number 9, you have the Gibeonites coming to Joshua. And it's not the first story most people would think of, but let me read it to just a portion of it to you real quick. In verse number 8, this is the Gibeonites talking. It says, And they said unto Joshua, We are thy servants. And Joshua said unto them, Who are ye? And from whence come ye? And they said unto him, From a very far country thy servants are come because of the name of the Lord thy God, for we have heard the fame of him, and all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites that were beyond Jordan, to Sihon the king of Heshbon, and Og the king of Bashan, which was at Ashtaroth. Wherefore our elders and all the inhabitants of our country spake to us, saying, Take victuals with you for the journey, and go to meet them, and say unto them, We are your servants, therefore now make ye a league with us. This is our bread we took hot for our provision out of our houses on the day that we came forth to go unto you. But now, behold, it is dry, and it is moldy. And these bottles of wine which we filled were new, and behold, they be rent and these our garments and our shoes are become old by reason of the very long journey. And the men took of their victuals, and asked not the counsel at the mouth of the Lord, and asked not counsel at the mouth of the Lord. Think about that, what we just read. People come to him, and all right, the first thing I mentioned is thinking it through. If Joshua stops and doesn't let his emotions get him, because the emotional thing in this situation is to look at these people who seem to be hurting. They're people who their food is molded, their bottles for their wine are broken, their clothes are broken. They claim to have come from far away and claim to love God and know that the God of Israel is true. And you just had, for example, like a Rahab who really legitimately did love God. I mean, she was interested and wanted to know him and knew that the God of Israel was the one true God. And so it's easy to think, oh, maybe there's others like this, other people out there who have heard the stories of our God. And so emotionally, you want to believe this. Emotionally, you want to help them, because if you have any decency at all, you want to help somebody who's genuinely in need and somebody who has the right heart and wants to do the right things. And so in this moment, if you're letting your emotions guide you, you say, of course. Somebody comes, for example, you have this at church all the time. Somebody comes and they, I don't have money for this and this and this and this. Can you please give some money to us? I have kids and I have these things. And your first reaction typically as a Christian is, I want to help this person. Now, I've learned to be a little more distrusting of it, because I've got to know way too many of the people who actually go from church to church asking for money. I've got to know many of them personally through just being a preacher and a pastor now. So I've learned a lot of their tricks and their scams. Also, just to be honest, I have some people quite closely related to me, and that when I was growing up, that was a lot of what they did, was scam and take advantage of churches. So I got to see a little bit of it firsthand even before I was a Christian. So all that aside, what I know is that if you're looking at this emotionally, you want to help them. If you don't stop to think about it, you're not going to notice that there's some problems here. And this is what I would recommend. Anytime somebody comes to you and they're trying to appeal to your Christianity for help, and especially if you don't know this person, stop and think about it logically for just a moment. When you have somebody who has a brand new iPhone or a relatively new one, or they're wearing name brand clothes, or they are very clearly well bathed and well groomed, even if their clothes are a little broken and a little dirty, and their stories just aren't adding up. Or for example, there's a guy who used to sit in our city and say, I need 5 more euros to get to Romania, and 5 years later he's still asking for 5 more euros to get to Romania. You don't have to look far to see that there's a lack of logic there. There was a Polish man used to sit out in the city with his German Shepherd, and he wouldn't even ask anything. He just set the can of the dog food out, implying that his dog was hungry. And Belgians really, really love animals. At one time, if not still, they had the highest pet to people ratio in the world. And so you have this man who sets this food out, and people give him money. They don't know that he actually goes every night, and he works as a handyman or klusjesman. He goes around every night working houses, and he has more money than they probably do. But I've watched him collect, 20, 30 euros an hour, no problem, just by setting out a can of dog food and taking a nap. And then he works all night and makes plenty of money. Or the other thing people don't consider, you see a man who's clearly smells of alcohol, clearly has, addiction problems and so forth, and he's asking for money. It's not because he's looking for money for food. He's looking for it for something else. But if you step back just to look, you'll see the inconsistencies. For example, if somebody's been wearing clothes long enough for them to be broken on their way on a journey, I doubt their bread's only just recently started to mold. That's something that for me would be a major red flag when somebody's trying to sell their story. My bread, we've been gone so long, my shoes are broken and my clothes have holes in them, and my kids have started to grow up and grow a beard now, which I'm exaggerating on that last one, but the bread that we baked the day we left, that's just now started to mold. There's a different wear ratio on some of that stuff. You should be able to step back and realize, well, that doesn't add up, man. That doesn't make any sense. even your timing and stuff of some of these things you're listing, if you come from so far away that you've had time to break your clothes, then why are you referencing events that are fairly recent? I mean, that stuff in Egypt, yeah, it was a long, long, long time ago. But some of this other stuff's pretty recent now. And also, your timing's pretty suspicious. You start to see those red flags when you stop to think about something before you make a decision. But Joshua didn't do that. Joshua let an emotional reaction cause him to make a decision that he never thought about. Even more egregious is that he made a decision that he didn't pray about either. He didn't seek counsel from God. And let's add this, he didn't seek counsel from anybody else, really. You don't really see him and the people really having a big debate about it. They're there, but they don't really stop to talk about it. Nobody stops to ask any questions or raise any concerns. They just all kind of it's the Christian thing to do, is to help somebody. They don't actually think about, is this really somebody that God put in my path to help, or is this somebody who's taking advantage of my kindness? That is what's happening in the story, and it does happen. And so they make a decision without praying, without seeking God's face, and the consequences of that are so severe that the Gibeonites staying there amongst Israel led to a lot of the sin and failure throughout their people, throughout their history. Now, I'm not saying that it was only the Gibeonites. There was a lot of other things they did wrong. There was a lot of idols that slipped in through other ways and a lot of sins that slipped in through other means. But that allowing the Gibeonites to exist within their people brought in a lot of sin and influences that God said should never be there. They were never allowed to let those things stay. But Joshua made a promise, and then he had to keep it. And God held him to it, that he had to keep his promise. So this fact that he didn't think about what he was doing and he didn't pray about it, because all he had to do was ask God. All he had to do is pray. He didn't have to spend 4 months fasting and praying. He just had to pray one time. Ask God, what should we do about these people? And God very clearly would have told him that they're con artists, they're tricksters who are lying to you. It's not like with us where sometimes we have to pray for a long time, or other people who have to pray for a long time in the Bible. This was one of those, if you just ask. And after Ai, you would think he would have learned his lesson, because he didn't ask God about the battle of Ai either. He's just like, oh yeah, we beat Jericho, so Ai's smaller. God, you can take a break today. We're just going to go take care of this. And what happened? He lost 27 people there on the first day when they went to fight. He had to, deal with some sin within their camp with Achan. And there's a lot of consequences because of the fact that he didn't ask God how should he handle fighting Ai in the same way that he asked God about fighting Jericho. Because he didn't look to God for advice about Ai, he lost and he had a lot of trouble. And now, because he didn't learn the lesson then, and he still just makes another emotional decision without asking God or thinking it through, he puts the people in a promise that will never end. They have to have this problem from now on, I guess. And so that's why when we look at this, it's such an important story for us to learn from, that we can't just make quick decisions based off of emotions, based off of, quick ideas of what is moral. We actually have to stop and think about it. So let me take that same thing and apply it to something very similar today. When you see the guy sitting on the side of the street who's a drug addict, and he's a drug addict, he's a drunk if you know him, or if you just take a moment to look. And I'm not saying everybody everywhere. I understand there's a few exceptions here and there. But most of the people who, for example, in my city are homeless and are begging are either professional beggars who are, gypsies, to be honest, or they're men who struggle with alcohol or drugs. There are a few exceptions here and there, but usually they don't stay on the street long because it's not that hard to get off the street here. Anybody I know who stays there for a length of time is one of those two things. Now, think about that for a moment and ask yourself the question. If I actually ask, what would God have me to do? Would God have me to support a man financially in his desire to drink more alcohol or more drugs, to continue to live on the street and destroy his life in alcohol and drugs? Is that what God would have me to invest my money in? And I think if you think about it, the answer is going to be no. You want to buy him some food or something, that's a different issue. That's something else. But if we're talking about just giving money directly to somebody who we know that's what they're struggling with and feeding their struggles, I don't think you can biblically justify that. So there's my example of why it's so important that we don't just rush into decisions, but we think it through. Now, I'm actually at the end, and we have a few of our regular people coming in, so I give my greetings to you, but I'm getting ready to close. So if you have any questions, I'll give you a second to type in those questions and ask whatever questions you may have. However, I'm not expecting that I'll get too many, since A lot of the people who normally ask my questions have only recently come into the study. I will take a moment, though, as I give you that chance to type in any questions, because I wanted to share something, just a little story about this verse. Our text verse was Proverbs 19 and verse number 2. Proverbs 19 and verse number 2 says that also that the soul be without knowledge, it is not good, and he that hasteth with his feet sinneth. The reason I want to tell a story about it is because it is a verse that has always had a special part in my life to me, just because of this one story. You see, one day, and this has nothing to do much with the lesson, it's just buying a moment for people to type questions. So don't let me lose you with this. It's just enjoy it for a moment and laugh. You're okay to laugh. One day I was on a missions trip of sorts, not really a missions trip, but I was working with a ministry group that I used to work with, and we had a project we were doing, and I was one of the people who was in charge of that project. But we had a preacher that was there helping us with this project who was one of those guys who struggles to follow leadership. He's just rebellious in his nature, a little bit of a wild person, always loud. And when I do my impression of him, anybody from my area is going to know who I'm talking about, so I'm trying to be at least a little bit cryptic. But I liked him, but I was also like a oil and water kind of mixture where we just didn't really mix good. Mostly I hung close to him because I was the one who could keep him in line a little better than other people. But also I got on his nerves about as much as he got on everybody else's nerves. So I don't know if we were a good combination or a really bad one. But in general, I enjoyed him. So I tried to be friends with him, but I just, like I said, I'd give back to him what he gave to everybody else. So we went to this trip and we had to stay overnight. And so me and him slept in a prophet's chamber that had been set up, a little place for some preachers and stuff to say, while the others slept in another place. And I stayed there because I heard it was bad. Like the couch that was there, I heard it was awful. I heard it was worse than sleeping on rocks, and I didn't believe it could be that bad because I could sleep about anywhere. And sure enough, I would have been better off to have taken a bunch of rocks and ground up nails and broken glass and slept on it than sleep on that couch. So I had a pretty rough night. He was a little bit of a snorer, and so he wakes me up first thing in the morning with, "Bless God, Brother Junior, wake up. You can't be sleeping all day. You got to wake up, Brother Junior." And so I jump out of bed and look to see what's going on, and realize that he's just crazy first thing in the morning. So I quoted to him another verse in Proverbs: "He that riseth early, greeting his friend with a loud voice, it shall be counted as a curse unto him." I quoted that to him immediately. We went and got breakfast. We were getting ready to cross the street. And I'm just not the kind of person who rushes about stuff in general. I try to do things right, but I don't try to rush, and I try not to be lazy either. Now, I'm a little bit bad about procrastinating, but it's just my nature. It's who I am. I try to take time to do things right, and if people know me, know that that's what I do. He's the exact opposite. He rushes in everything, and that's why I'm using him as my illustration to a degree here. So we ate our breakfast. We're crossing the street to go back to the work site where we're going to be working at, and he starts yelling at me, "Bless God, Brother Junior, you got to run. You got to run. You can't walk now. You got to run." And it's like, I have the right of way here. It's a crosswalk. I'm not running. But he's yelling at me, "Bless God, you got to run." So I just quoted to him this verse: "He that hastes with his feet sinneth." And so he got a little bit frustrated. He went away, and we're working a little while later, and he's complaining because I'm measuring stuff too precisely, that I'm taking the time to get it accurate. And I'm trying to explain to him that there's a difference between me and him, largely because of what he did professionally and what I did professionally. As I was a machinist, and he did something where you could be off by several centimeters, and it wouldn't make any difference, and I have to work within the thickness of less than a hair on your head. So there's a dramatic difference between his quality control and mine, and he didn't like that. So then I don't remember what the last verse I quoted, but I quoted him another verse about taking the time to do things right. So probably even one of the verses we've used tonight. But in fact, I'm almost sure it's the one about tending to diligence. The second verse we use probably. I quoted that to him, and then he got mad, and he said he wasn't going to work with me no more. He was done. He wasn't going to hang out with me, and he went to go storm off and go somewhere. And then I just spoke up and reminded him, brother, last person I can think of who, when they got 3 Bible verses quoted to him, had to run away in defeat was the devil when he tried to tempt Jesus. After that, he really did run away and didn't want to come back and work with me. In fact, eventually he quit and wouldn't work with me anymore at all, and had some very unnice things to say about me. But that's why this verse has always been special to me. I saved it till the very end because if you made it this far, you're probably going to cut me off anyways. But I saved that till the very end to give a chance for people who wanted to type in a question or anything to share my little story about my friend there. Why this verse is always one that stands out of my memory. In fact, all those verses stand out of my memory because of this story mostly. All right, I didn't have any questions coming in. I see that people are having a chat, but I don't see any questions. If I got any, I missed it. So I appreciate those who've come in. I appreciate having some, let's say, unique viewers today, people who don't normally watch a lot of the stuff, having some of the more faithful people coming in throughout the study at different times. And then, I just appreciate you being there. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready to close down the live stream then. All right, if you enjoyed, leave a comment. If you've not liked or subscribed to the channels, all that stuff, be sure to do so. And get ready for here in the near future a change to what the Tuesday night Bible studies will be. We'll be finishing this one up here in just a few weeks, and then after that we're moving into a whole different series, something very different altogether. So we'll look to that soon. All right, thank you again for your time. Hope that the study is a help to you. I think in terms of important subject, I think it's one of the more important subjects we've talked about in this entire study. So hopefully people watch it. Maybe if you want, you can share it with people, because I really think it'll help people if they can get past me tripping on technical issues in the beginning and my jokes at the end. I think it can be a help to people. All right, hope to see you at church tomorrow, and have a good evening.